All right, so welcome to this live event where I will be discussing the connection between our psychology and chronic fatigue. And when I talk about psychology, I'm referring to our mindset, the way we think, as well as our emotions and our responses and behaviors based on that, and then how these all impact the physical body and feed into fatigue. Before I begin, let me just introduce myself. I am Kerry Magnus. I am a holistic psychologist and a body talk practitioner. And I have come to specialize in the treatment of chronic fatigue through understanding the underlying psychological patterns that keep us stuck in fatigue. This is to enable people to become more aware of who they truly are, what they truly want, and to embrace that purpose without burning out. So this is going to become a bit more obvious as I go into this topic. I am also a mother of two. I live in Cape Town, South Africa, and I'm married. And I also experienced fatigue. And so I would say it was for many years, but I was only diagnosed with adrenal fatigue syndrome in 2013 after the birth of my first child. And it was when I started to look at how I was experiencing life and how I was doing life that I finally could actually do anything about the fatigue. So what happened was I went to see a functional medical doctor. I took the right supplements, hormones. I did a detox and a gut repair, and it made a big difference. But I went straight back to doing life the way I'd always done it, and to still being me, essentially me being my psyche, the way I was made up. And I crashed again, and I repeated that 4 times until I think I also hadn't had the capacity. I knew that I couldn't rily just on the supplements and the diets, etc. But I did not have the capacity to do it any differently. I didn't have the energy to. I was looking after at that point, 2 children who were very young. I just didn't have the capacity and the energy to look at this as like, well, what's going on underneath all of this? And the psychologist I went to just wanted to put me on antidepressants, and I knew it was so much more than that. So I didn't know who to go to, and I eventually in 2016 had the space. And I also reached a point where I was like, I can't do this again. I can't keep crashing. Like, let me look at what it is about me and how I am doing life and experiencing life that is making me keep crashing, because I can't just depend on a functional medical doctor and supplements, etc. And so this is how I've now developed the body, mind, and spirits approach that I use to help my own clients after I did my own exploration and worked out how to overcome my own fatigue. And for me, it's still an unfolding story. I think it always will be. I've just become so much more conscious of how I respond. I know when to put things in place. I know when to do my stop reset, which is part of what I explain in my fatigue to flow coaching. But for now, I'm going to try and give you, it's a very comprehensive topic, so I'm going to try to keep it simple and explain the basis of the connection between psychology and chronic fatigue. So at any point, if you're watching the replay, just type in hashtag replay and comments, place your questions in the comments. So I will be checking this and I will answer any questions you may have, even on the replay. All right. So let's get going. So what I'm trying to say is that supplements, gut repair, detox, etc., they are good. They do have a place, but they're not enough for a lot of people. And this is because they're only addressing part of the picture. So it's almost like you have a leaky bucket and you just put more water into the bucket, and instead of actually fixing the holes. And yes, the supplements, the gut repair, the healthy food, all of that is going to fix some of those holes, but not all of them. And the bucket is going to remain leaky. And the problem is that most people don't realize that, A, they have a leaky bucket, because this is just always the way they've done life. B, if they do realize that the bucket's leaky, they don't know what to do about it. They don't know like where to even begin. And so C, they often give their power away to other people to tell them what to do. And those people don't necessarily address the leaky bucket. So especially if you're going to see a conventional doctor, who for the most part, most conventional doctors don't recognize chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue syndrome, etc. They just don't really know what to do about it. Okay, so this is why I feel it is so important to understand the psychology behind it, so that you can then become conscious of this and start to become aware of what you can do for yourself. So it's very much about empowerment. So it was from the moment that I accepted that I had this fatigue, that it wasn't going to go away unless I made a change. And I also accepted it as a gift in that sense, because it was telling me, my body was telling me, it was talking to me and telling me that I was doing something that was not in my greatest and highest good. I was not serving myself through how I was living life. And my body was trying to tell me that. And when I listened and I surrendered, I stopped resisting what was going on, which gave me a whole lot of energy back already. And I took my power back and started to listen to myself and figure out what it was that I needed. So with psychology, we always understand it as how we experience an event, or this is a good way to look at it. So you have an event which in itself is neutral, or a situation. Then depending on your own particular personality and experiences, you will interpret that a certain way and give it a meaning. Based on the interpretation and the meaning, you will have an emotional response, as well as possibly a behavioral response, so what you're going to do. And these both will impact your energy in your body, and they're going to impact your physiology. So our thoughts there are energy thoughts, and our thoughts influence matter, which is our body. So our emotions and our thoughts influence matter. This is what's really important to understand. This is the body and mind connection. We know this through when we get anxious and we get butterflies in the stomach. This is the most common way of being aware of it. Or you have a slightly loose stool if you are anxious. So firstly, I want to look at these on all of those levels. For people who have chronic fatigue, what I have noticed is that many of them, and to be fair, most people suppress emotions because we haven't been taught how to actually allow them. So emotions are not bad. Emotions, again, are communicating something to us. And whether it's fear that's communicating that we need caution, or grief that is a process we need to go through to get to acceptance. But we have tended to fear our emotions and not know what to do with them, so we suppress them. As I said, emotions are energy. You can feel them in your body. I want you to just think of being sad. And where do you hold that? Some people might feel it in their throats. Some people might feel it in their chest, in their lungs. I have this thing sometimes, if I feel really sad, my hands go tingly. I don't know if I'm the only one. I've never actually asked anyone. Think about where you feel fear and what happens in your body. Okay, so we hold. I'll give you a moment to think about that, to feel fear. So these emotions have energy in our body, and ideally we should, I don't like using the word should, it is preferential to feel the emotion and process it to allow it to drop away. So what happens is when you give it attention, when you shine your light on it, the emotion and the energy is released. Okay, but we don't. We tend to put the lid on it and it stays stuck in our bodies. And to the degree that that emotion is stuck in our bodies, it's going to have a physical impact on energy flow. And secondly, to the degree that we hold in our bodies, our physiology, our musculoskeletal alignment changes. So if we are people who tend to feel out of control a lot and need to hold everything together and be in control, our bodies will often be like this. We'll be tense. If we often feel overwhelmed, there'll be tension and holding in the body. And this tension literally your body over time holds this. This is how our bodies are. It's our default posture. And as my osteopath always says to me, your form then dictates your function. So for instance, I tend to hold a lot in my shoulders and my neck, and then around my heart. And this is quite common for a lot of people. And for me, there was a torsion around my diaphragm, so like a twist, and also in my pelvis, which was then impacting my capacities to metabolize food properly. And if we're holding around the heart, all of this, it all impacts circulation, nerve supply, energy, flow, and general functioning within the body. And as we release our emotions and as we address traumas and things that we hold in our body, our bodies can actually soften. There's a softening that happens, and then there's better physiological functioning that happens. And then that is amazing for addressing any fatigue or lack of vitality that you experience. So firstly, we suppress our emotions often, which can lead to depletion. Can lead to physical difficulties that lead to depletion. We can hold emotion in our body in a way that the body is tense, which impacts our physical functioning and can lead to depletion. We also, now this is such an overused word, but our stress. So how we interpret situations is going to determine how our body responds from a fight or flight response, or how our autonomic nervous system responds, which is either fight, flight, or freeze, or rest and digest, which is parasympathetic. And the other one is sympathetic. So I'm just going to stick with fight, flight, freeze, and rest and digest. This word gets thrown around so much that people tend to shut down straight away. I'm going to rather look at stress as when we feel overwhelmed. And when we feel overwhelmed, we usually are feeling out of control. And when we're feeling out of control, it's often because we are feeling like children again. Stress in itself is not bad. Stress actually builds resilience. And in fact, there is a man named Ari Whitten who talks about hormesis. He's not the first person to talk about it, but he speaks about it a lot, or hormetic stress, which is where a small amount of stress enables the body to become stronger. And it can be used, in fact, to overcome fatigue and to build more mitochondria in the body. So stress is not in itself a bad thing. It is chronic stress that is not good. And what I mean by that is ideally we should be in the rest and digest state for 20%, 80% of the day, and fight, flight, or freeze for 20% of the day. I'd like you to just think about that quickly. When you wake up in the morning and you're running a bit late, stress. If you've got children, that whole process is stressful from the minute you wake up until you get them out the door. If you're stuck in traffic, I don't know how many people are going to work at this point in time, but for when we were getting stuck in traffic or on a train trying to get to work, stress. You get asked to do something at work that feels a bit too much, stress. Someone says something to you that triggers something, there's stress. So there's so many little things during the day that add to our stress that we often can actually stay in this low grade fight, flight, or freeze response, and we don't go back to our baseline rest and digest, certainly not for 80% of the time. And we can only heal when we're in rest and digest. So our psychology determines how we interpret events in a way that will result in us feeling overwhelmed, out of control, powerless, and therefore go into fight, flight, or freeze. When we're in fight, flight, or freeze, the whole body is, like I say, the whole body, it feels like it's a whole. There's so many systems that are impacted by this, and it's usually to support us to actually do the fighting, the running. The freeze is a maladaptive response. It's when you feel like you can't run, or it's like when you feel there are no other options, and freeze is often what happens. But our bodies usually respond in a way that enable us to either fight or run. So in that sense, it's adaptive, but because we're doing it so often and for so long, it causes all of these systems to become imbalanced. For instance, your detox pathways are impacted, your digestion shuts down, so your digestion gets impacted. Your So metabolism is part of that too, how you produce energy. Your mitochondria are impacted. So your mitochondria can either be producing energy or they go into cell defense mode, and when they're in, or cell danger response, and when they're in danger response, they can't be producing energy. So if you're constantly in stress, the mitochondria are constantly in cell danger response. They cannot be producing energy. The endocrine system is massively, so it's a system. The whole thing is impacted. So if your adrenals are needing to produce adrenaline and cortisol, that's going to have a down the line cascade response on all of your hormones. So your reproductive hormone is going to be impacted. Your thyroid is going to be impacted. Your pancreas is going to be impacted, leading to insulin issues or blood sugar issues. So much in your body is impacted by being in the stress response. So that it's fine if it's here and there that it's happening. But when you have chronic stress response, when you're chronically activated into fight, flight, or freeze, then this is going to create imbalance in the body, which is going to result in depletion and fatigue. And there's none of that lovely rest and digest state, which enables you to recover. Okay. So that's so if we suppress emotions, that's the first one. Secondly, we hold, which when we suppress emotions, it impacts our physiology. We hold emotion in the body in the way that impacts our musculoskeletal alignment and our flow in the body. We experience stress in a chronic state, which results in imbalance in many systems of the body. And the last one is that we then we respond in a way that is protective. We do things not from an inspired, heart-led place. We do things very much from a fear-based, head-led place, where we respond in ways that are in alignment with what I call the holding personality. So for many people who I see in my practice with chronic fatigue, they have personality attributes that are very similar, characteristics. For instance, and you're not going to meet all of them, but maybe you'll recognize some of them. Needing to be in control, needing to be capable and responsible, so this is like lots of list taking and planning and always being in the head on top of things, worrying excessively as a way of feeling like one is in control. Lots of doing. They're feeling a need to succeed and achieve. So perfectionism is a big part of this. The flip side of perfectionism is procrastination, which is when people, where their expectations are so high, it's actually just easier to procrastinate versus face the possible failure of not being able to meet those expectations of the perfectionist. Also rescuing and fixing, inflexibility, lack of spontaneity. These are all aspects. These are how we respond to, they developed ultimately as coping mechanisms to not feel overwhelmed. And they're exhausting. So on their own, they're not necessarily bad. Like, it's great to be a person who's responsible and capable. But when you're doing that all the time and from a place of fear, because it's what you know, because you believe it gives you value and keeps you safe, it means you're not also going to listen to what your body really needs and what your truth is telling you to do. You've just got this default way of responding, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It prevents you from just being in flow and taking the easier route, which is often there because we may not see it, or we disconnected from our intuition, for instance, because we're just going on this default response of doing, holding, being in control, doing what makes us feel safe and feel of value. So those are the 4 things: suppressing emotions, holding emotion in our body in a way that that impacts our physiology, having a chronic stress response in fight, flight, and freeze, and adaptive responses in line with the holding personality. So why do many of us respond in this way? Why do some people manage their emotions better, not hold so much in their bodies, have softer, easier posture, not so easily go into stress, etc.? So this is where we have to look at, you can't do psychology without looking at your background. Or some people do. Some people look at some people only focus on the present. But most psychologists will look at your past to understand how your past created where you are in your present. So this is where this is what came to me about myself, and then I saw this in so many of my clients, is I realized that essentially I didn't feel safe in the world, and that I hadn't felt safe in the world for the longest time. And when I talk about safe, I'm not necessarily talking about crime, although in South Africa that's a massive part of this. And in fact, it was related, that was part of why I crashed so badly in 2015 again. But security is so much more. It is having your physical needs met, but it's also having your emotional needs met and being acknowledged and heard. Now, for some of us, we had overt trauma, which is physical, emotional trauma, even maybe sexual abuse. Maybe there was a lot of unpredictability as a child, lots of changes. And so for instance, I grew up in the Transkei, which was a homeland. There was a huge amount of political unrest. There was a house bomb down the road from where I lived. There was political violence where we had to get out of Umtata because we didn't know what was going to happen. Our family was personally influenced by the political violence due to my father's political allegiance and choices he made. So lots of unpredictability. So that lack of kind of consistency and predictability, which children really need. Not totally, because life is not always predictable, but you want to have a balance of mainly predictable and consistent with some unpredictabilities that we then get through and realize, okay, it's not too bad. But when there's a lot of unpredictability and change, it can impact your sense of security. So for most people, though, what happens is just a general lack of emotional holding, emotional containment. So we grew up, or my generation grew up, and then because our parents' generation grew up in this way of children should be controlled and seen but not heard, basically. We should tell children what to do and how to do it, for the most part. Obviously, I'm generalizing here. And there wasn't, you weren't really listened to. If you had an emotion, oftentimes, because our parents didn't know how to deal with the emotion, they would have squashed that emotion, maybe even criticized that emotion, like, oh, you're being such a crybaby, or you're being unreasonable, or they would have tried to distract you from having the emotion, or they would have disconnected emotionally so they didn't have to feel it, or put you in timeout so that they didn't have to feel it, because they had never been given the tools from their own parents. So what happens is, as a child, you have these huge feelings, which you can feel in your body, because remember, they're energy. You don't know what to do with them. The people around you don't seem to want to know about them, or even maybe criticize you for having them. And so you don't feel very safe. So what happens then? You develop coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms are the very things that create that holding personality. So those are things like, which are often mirrored on our parents' responses, by the way. So things like disconnecting from the body and being in the head, being very intellectual. Then also pushing yourself, striving, needing to be in control, doing a lot, versus just sitting quietly and being. And then needing to rescue or fix your parents, because if you can help them, then they can be there for you. So that's where that starts to develop. And so we do put all these things in place to feel as in control as we possibly can in a world that is feeling a little bit out of control, and in a world in which perhaps we don't feel very valued. Because if we were important, or if our emotions were important, or if our needs were important, then our parents wouldn't disconnect from them or criticize us for having them. So there's those things that we learn, that our emotions are not safe, or that they are bad. We develop belief systems about ourselves, like I'm not important, my needs don't matter, the world is not a safe place, or I am alone, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. Then we develop coping mechanisms so we don't have to feel these things. And finally, because you're in low grade fight flight so much of the time, it actually calibrates the nervous system so that you do quickly and easily. Easily is not the right word, it makes it sound like it's a good thing. But the body basically very quickly goes into fight, flight, or freeze as a default. It becomes like a learned response. Oh, wait, this is that situation that's happening again. Last time this happened, what happened? I went into fight, flight because it's a threat. So it actually becomes like an habitual response. So we can actually have a dysfunctional HPA axis, which is hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, where as soon as there's even the smallest perception of a threat, there's a psychology of it. In other words, feeling I'm alone, I'm not good enough, I've got this emotion, this is bad, whatever it is, that when the emotion is then triggered to that perception of the experience, the body very quickly, the brain very quickly interprets it in a way that makes the body produce all the things that put us into fight, flight, or so all the chemicals that make the body prepare for fight, or flight. And so very easily going into stress, and oftentimes not very seldom actually properly coming back into rest and digest, more often just staying in this kind of baseline low grade fight, flight response. So this is where our psychology impacts that stress response so much as well. So just knowing all of this is going to make a massive difference, because it's going to help you to become conscious that this is what's going on. It takes it out of the shadow and gives you the capacity to do something about it and to respond in a different way. Even if for now it's just recognizing that that's what you do. So like I said, with me, it was accepting that perhaps I'm not experiencing and doing life in the way that's best for me right now. And my adrenal fatigue was what gave me the impetus to have that realization. And then I started to work with my body instead of against it. So this is what you can do. So step one, see if you are able, this is hard, see if you're able to accept that perhaps your fatigue is trying to tell you something about how you're doing life, and that there might just be a different way of doing it. Choose to work with your body then instead of against it. And already you will find that this is going to give you a sense of relief and ease, because you're going to stop resisting your experience of fatigue. And it's amazing how that can already shift things for you, give you more empowerment and more energy. Then notice, so that's step one. Accept it and start working with your body instead of against it. Step two, notice how you are doing that holding, that self-reliance, how the holding personality is showing up in your life. This is through your responses. Recognize where you are pushing, where you are striving, where you are wired and where there's an urgency, where you are needing to fix and protect, where you are easily irritated, easily activated. So if you notice these things coming up in your life, like I went through a while. I said to my therapist, the one who wanted to put me on antidepressants, I said, I feel like I'm bipolar sometimes. Like I just go into this like frenzied state. But basically, part of it was my cortisol levels weren't great. But it is also when I was overwhelmed, I would just go into doing. I was like needing to control it. Underneath it was deep anxiety and a doing to control, so I could feel back in my power again. So just start to notice what you're doing that may be a sign that you are feeling overwhelmed and you've gone into using your coping mechanisms, that those are kind of holding and self-reliant coping mechanisms. Because when you learned as a child that you couldn't trust those around you, that the world was an unsafe place, those are the things that you put in place to feel safe. You don't need them anymore. Okay, but they're such a default, you may not even recognize that they're not serving you and in fact are depleting you. Try to recognize when you are doing those things. Then recognize, you can also now use your body to recognize when you are. So you don't just see yourself doing those behaviors, so you can start to feel them. So what I'd like you to do right now is to think of the last time that you were overwhelmed and things felt a bit out of control, and perhaps you noticed yourself really doing a lot and needing to plan and make lists and be super organized and just kind of a bit of in that sort of place, or holding in some way. Feel in your body now where you feel that. Just close your eyes and just feel into your body. Breathe into your body, right down into your belly. And just think of that time and notice how your body changes, even if it's very subtle. Are you holding your breath? Are you, do you have tension in your shoulders? Are you pulling up and forward in your body, or are you rested down and back in your body? Is there a feeling of pulling it all together or being relaxed and open? How does your gut feel? So really just getting a sense of what your body does when you are in that holding space. So when your mind has perceived something as a threat, which has resulted in an emotional response, and then a physical, both perhaps a behavioral response and then a physical response. So you notice the behavioral response in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then notice your physical response in your body. When you have a sense of this, you are already taking your power back, because now you can recognize, oh, I'm doing that thing that gets me into a fight-flight response in overwhelm, that makes me then become depleted. What can I then do about it? So this is the next part, is to then, you've now used your body to recognize, you can also use your body to address this, to help yourself to calm your nervous system and to tell yourself that you are safe. So the first way to do this is to use your breath. This is breathing slowly and regularly and consciously right down into your belly, as if you're breathing into your pelvis, into your pelvic bowl, allowing your belly to expand like a balloon, and then breathing out again to release. So you're breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth. Slack and relaxed jaw. When you relax your jaw, you're relaxing your pelvis. The pelvis becomes very tight when we're needing to be in control, when we're feeling out of control. It's around our sense of being grounded. If we don't feel grounded, the pelvis pulls together like this, and we pull up. Breathing in, out, and relaxing and dropping down into your body. The breath is life. We are breathing in chi, prana, life force with the breath. So it's about accepting life. I can bet you most of you, but before I spoke to you about breathing, we're holding your breaths. And I notice myself doing it quite often, because now I've become more conscious of it. So breathing fully and deeply. There's another breath, which is some people prefer, which is called the box breath, which is breathing in for 4, holding for 7, breathing out for 8. What's nice about the breath as well is when you're focusing on your breath, you get out of your head. You can't be in your body and your head at the same time. It's not possible. And your body can only breathe slowly and regularly when you are in the parasympathetic or rest and digest state. So this is kind of like tricking your body by using the breath first, which then tells the mind, oh, hold on, okay, I'm fine. And it regulates the nervous system. So there's a lot that you can do with your breath. That's number 1. Number 2 is gentle shaking. So naturally in the wild, animals will tremor after they have a stressful experience. And this is because they are releasing the stress that they've been holding in the body. They're releasing what's built up as a result of the stress. And they're releasing all the holding and tension. And we can do this as well. And what it does is it gets all that energy flowing better and helps to release the stress. So to do this, you stand on the balls of your feet. Well, you have the balls of your feet still connected to the ground. Let me see if you're still going to get me in the picture here. And you're going to just gently shake like this. just shaking, keeping your body very loose and allowing even your neck to, you don't want to overdo it, obviously you don't want to cause injuries, but allowing your neck to be loose and your head to be loose and just shaking. Feel how your shoulders are relaxed and your arms are relaxed, and just shake your body for as long as you feel. You can keep your feet flat, you can also lift a bit onto the balls of your feet, but your feet must be connected to the ground. And shake like this. And I sometimes even just kind of give myself a, like as if I was cold. Ugh. And then when you stop, just feel into your body. And what you should notice is you're actually quite tingly. It's almost like you have tingles running through your body. You may not, we're all different, but this is a sign of the energy flowing in the body. Okay, and it can really help to reset your body to do this shake. So that's the second one. And then the third one is to use touch. So touch, when we use touch, we soothe ourselves. It helps the body to produce oxytocin, and it really calms the nervous system. So whether you want to just touch your face, like stroke your face like this, or your arms, there's actually a whole technique around this called the havening technique. So you're stroking your arms because there's specific receptors here on the arms. You can stroke your arms like this. You can even stroke your belly. Like I sometimes can feel the disquiet, the unease in my belly, and then I'll just sort of stroke the belly, and you're helping your whole body to calm down. So breathing, shaking, and touch. And what you're also doing is you're reparenting your inner child in a way that you never had. So you're recognizing the emotion, so you're acknowledging it in yourself. You're not suppressing it and disconnecting from it. Acknowledging it. Then you are addressing it through being with yourself and calming and regulating yourself in a way that you were not calmed or regulated when you were younger. And you're going to start to change your defaults. Your nervous system is going to move from its normal optimal, it's not optimal, it's default response up here, and this kind of fight flight, sort of low grade fight flight response or freeze, to moving into more of a rest and digest place where you can start to heal. There's a whole lot more to this, because you'll also start to connect back to your truth and what you really need. You'll be able to start listening to that and giving yourself what you need. You'll be able to start operating from a place of truth and not fear. But this foundation that I've just shared with you, so recognizing, so just going through that again, accepting that your chronic fatigue is letting you know that the way you've been doing life is not serving you and that something needs to change. And then working with your body to heal your body, number one. Number two, noticing the holding in your body, noticing when you go into that holding state, when you are basically when you've got into overwhelm, into fight, flight, or freeze, by looking at your behaviors and then feeling it in your body, feeling what it feels like, that you'll have a familiar sense. So for me, it was around tightness around my back and around my heart and my shoulders and neck. Also a bit of a wired feeling in my body. And then addressing it through breath, shaking, and touch. So even having the awareness of all of this is going to be a big win. It's a great place to start. And it's putting the power back in putting the ball in your court. It's taking back your power instead of feeling overwhelmed and powerless and out of control, which is where this mainly comes from. It will really benefit you to address traumas, to address your own particular unique belief systems about the world, and to address, to just become more conscious of your own particular responses, because sometimes we need someone else to help us to see them. So this is obviously what I do as a psychologist. You may find someone you want to work with. Body talk is very useful for addressing these imbalances on a deeper unconscious level. There are other modalities that you may find that are also useful. So this is actually the foundation of my Fatigue to Flow coaching program that I offer. And then I go on to sharing the importance of establishing a safety net for yourself, how your sense of something greater than yourself, so spirituality, how that comes into it, and then creating a plan for you to always have in place so that you know what to do when you recognize that you've gone into your own space, your own holding space, this place of self-reliance and overwhelm, and holding it all tightly together, so that you end up, I don't give people the answers. I help them to find the answers themselves. It also involves connecting back to yourself and your intuition and your truth, which is how you were created. You were created to know exactly what you need. And we tend to give our power away way too easily to tell for other people to tell us. I'm going to be hopefully finishing a book soon. I finished the first draft. I'm working on the second draft. I'm taking some time off this month to finish the second draft. I'm really hoping it's going to come out by the end of the year or early next year, which will explain so much more. There's also information on my website. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please type them in the comments underneath when you're watching the replay, and I will respond to those. And if you have, maybe I can do another Facebook Live around certain things that come up for most people. So I'm going to leave it there. I really wish you all the best on this journey. This is a gift. I know it doesn't feel like it. It is an opportunity. Maybe that's a better word for you. An opportunity to choose to live your best version of your life by looking at what's not working for you and becoming conscious of it, so it doesn't have to control you anymore. And I really believe this is possible. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've seen it in so many of my own clients. And yes, it's not an easy journey, but it's not easy being where you are either. So we kind of get to the point where we're like, well, either stay in the difficulty or choose a path that may not be easy all the time, but is going to result in amazing gains. Okay. Wishing you all the best. Take care.